Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. What is often called superpowers is not magic or mystery. It is the natural potential of the human system, unlocked when energy is managed consciously and efficiently. In this video with Sara Gamberoni, we explore how the brain, body, and perception interact, how mental and physical energy can be accumulated and preserved, and how small, consistent practices can lead to profound transformations in clarity, intuition, and awareness. No rituals, no secrets, just a step-by-step approach to discovering the extraordinary abilities already present within every human being. According to Sara Gamberoni, when we speak of superpowers, we already make a first conceptual mistake. The term itself suggests something extraordinary, rare, almost mythological. But from her perspective, there is nothing truly supernatural. Rather, there are physiological, mental, and energetic conditions that allow humans to express normally latent potential. At the foundation of everything, she explains, lies a very simple principle: energy. Not energy in an abstract or New Age sense, but concrete, biological energy, measurable in the processes of the body. Every human function, thought, emotion, perception, memory, intuition, requires energy. The brain, though representing a small percentage of body weight, consumes an enormous amount of metabolic resources. If the body is constantly engaged in compensating for imbalances, inflammation, heavy digestion, or chronic stress, the energy available for higher functions drastically decreases. What many traditions have described as clairvoyance, expanded perception, or extrasensory abilities could simply emerge when the organism's energetic system ceases to be dissipative and becomes accumulative. The central concept then becomes this: it is not about adding something, but about stopping dispersion. Energy dispersion, in her analysis, occurs on multiple levels. There is physical dispersion related to lifestyle. There is metabolic dispersion linked to nutrition. There is emotional and mental dispersion tied to recursive thoughts, stress, and fragmented attention. When these losses are reduced, the body enters a condition of surplus. An energy surplus qualitatively changes the functioning of the nervous system. The process that leads to the development of expanded capacities consists of roughly 60% mental component and 40% lifestyle factors. This proportion is not random. The mind, in her view, is the regulatory center of every energetic dynamic. How a person thinks, interprets, and reacts to events determines energy consumption or conservation more than any other factor. However, the remaining 40% is not secondary. It is the structural foundation upon which mental work can rest. Among the fundamental elements of lifestyle, Gamberoni places sleep first. Respecting the circadian rhythm is not a minor detail for her, but an indispensable condition. The human organism is designed to operate according to precise light-dark cycles. When these cycles are disrupted, the entire endocrine system is affected. The production of melatonin, cortisol, and other regulatory hormones changes, directly influencing the quality of available energy. Sleeping little or at irregular times does not just mean feeling tired the next day. It compromises cellular repair, brain detoxification, and neural network consolidation. In chronic sleep deprivation, the brain operates in survival mode, not expansion mode. According to Sara Gamberoni, no meditative practice or mental technique can compensate for chronic lack of sleep. The circadian rhythm thus represents a sort of biological foundation of energetic balance. Staying up late, exposing oneself to intense artificial light at night, or using electronic devices just before bed profoundly alters the natural architecture of the nervous system. Alongside sleep, nutrition is another decisive element. While assigning it a lower percentage than the mental component, Gamberoni considers nutrition responsible for approximately 15 to 20% of the capacity to accumulate energy. It is not the main factor, but it is a concrete and modifiable variable. In her view, the problem with modern nutrition is not just the quality of food, but the combinations. In particular, she emphasizes that the simultaneous pairing of carbohydrates and proteins in the same meal requires greater digestive effort. Every digestive process consumes energy. If the system is forced to manage complex combinations, the resources required increase and the residual availability decreases. Digestion, she explains, is one of the most energy-demanding processes in the human body. After a heavy meal, it is no coincidence that we feel drowsy. It is not only a matter of blood sugar. It is an energetic redistribution. Blood and metabolic resources are directed toward the digestive system, temporarily reducing supply to the brain. From an energy accumulation perspective, the goal becomes simplification. Simplifying digestion means reducing systemic inflammation. Here enters another central concept in her analysis: low-grade chronic inflammation. According to Gamberoni, a constant inflammatory state, even if not perceived as disease, represents a continuous form of energy dispersion. The immune system remains active, engaged, vigilant. This state diverts resources from the central nervous system. In this logic, the ideal nutrition is not what stimulates most, but what disturbs least. Another point she emphasizes concerns the difference between whole fruit and extracts. Whole fruit contains fiber that modulates sugar absorption. Extracts, by removing fiber, quickly concentrate the glycemic load. This can generate insulin spikes and subsequent energetic fluctuations. Fluctuations are enemies of accumulation. A stable energetic system, on the contrary, is characterized by smooth curves, continuity, and absence of abrupt metabolic jumps. According to Gamberoni, the pursuit of expanded states of consciousness cannot disregard this baseline stability. The brain, when operating in a metabolically balanced context, can stabilize more easily at alpha frequencies, associated with relaxed alertness, creativity, and intuition. Alpha waves are not esoteric. They are simply a brain electrical pattern emerging when activity is harmonic and not fragmented. Under stress, faster and disorganized frequencies prevail. Under balance, the system synchronizes. Synchronization is another key word in her presentation. When the organism is not engaged in compensating for imbalances, neural networks can cooperate more efficiently. This cooperation may translate into heightened perceptual sensitivity, rapid intuition, and easier access to information normally not processed consciously. In this sense, what is called extraordinary ability could simply be an optimal configuration of the nervous system. Gamberoni does not speak of activating hidden powers through rituals or mysterious techniques. She speaks of removing obstacles, reducing interference, and lightening systemic load. Humans, in her perspective, already possess much greater potential than they usually utilize, but this potential requires available energy. And available energy requires order, rhythm, and coherence. It is not about doing more. It is about dispersing less. This is the theoretical foundation on which she builds the entire subsequent discourse, the idea that the development of human capacities is not an addition, but a subtraction of dispersive habits, disorganized eating, irregular sleep, and fragmented thinking. According to Sara Gamberoni, if nutrition and lifestyle form the structural base of energy accumulation, the mind determines the direction in which that energy is oriented. The mind is not merely a product of the brain, but a dynamic system that organizes, consumes, and distributes energy constantly. Every thought has an energetic cost. Every prolonged emotion alters the organism's biochemistry. Every recurring mental state creates a metabolic habit. In this perspective, the most subtle and pervasive dispersion is not dietary, but cognitive. Continuous inner dialogue, rumination, anticipatory anxiety, and attention fragmentation are forms of constant microenergy consumption. They do not necessarily produce immediate collapse, but generate a continuous subtraction of resources. Most people live in a state of permanent mental overactivation. This state keeps the nervous system on alert, dominated by rapid brain frequencies typical of vigilance-oriented control. In this condition, energy is used to monitor, anticipate, and react. There is no margin for expansion. The first transformation, therefore, is not about adding sophisticated techniques, but about reducing mental noise. Reducing noise means decreasing the number of simultaneous processes active in consciousness. It means training attention to remain focused without dispersion. Attention, in Sara Gamberoni's view, is one of the main energetic regulators of the human being. Where attention goes, energy flows. If attention is fragmented across multiple stimuli, energy divides. If attention is concentrated, energy accumulates. This principle explains why practices of concentration, meditation, or simple mindful presence have such profound effects on the nervous system. It is not about entering a mystical state, but about reducing attentional dispersion. One of the main problems of contemporary life, according to her analysis, is overstimulation. Notifications, screens, multitasking, and continuous interruptions force the brain to switch rapidly from one task to another. Each context switch requires energy. Each interruption breaks a flow. Over time, this mode produces a reactive mind, not a deep one. And a reactive mind consumes far more than it produces. At the opposite end, a stable mental state allows the brain to organize more coherently. Here comes the discussion of brain waves. When mental activity slows without becoming drowsy, the system can stabilize at alpha frequencies, characterized by more harmonious synchronization between different brain areas. Synchronization is not an abstract concept. It means neural networks communicate efficiently, without excessive interference. In this condition, according to Gamberoni, sudden insights, rapid connections between information, and finer perceptions of the environment can emerge. It is not about acquiring information externally in a paranormal way, but about processing more deeply what is already perceived unconsciously. A quieter mind perceives more. According to Sara Gamberoni, many abilities considered extraordinary derive simply from increased sensitivity, which rises when the system is not overloaded. Another central aspect concerns emotional management. Intense and prolonged emotions are highly energy-consuming. Anger, fear, guilt, resentment maintain the stress axis active, with continuous cortisol and adrenaline release. This state is useful in emergencies, but becomes destructive if chronic. When the body lives in permanent stress, energy is directed toward survival. The immune system is altered, digestion changes, sleep fragments. In these conditions, creating energetic surplus is impossible. From her perspective, developing human capacities requires an internal environment of safety. The nervous system must perceive stability. Only in a state of relative physiological calm is it possible to access subtler levels of perception. Calmness is not passivity. It is energy economy. Sara Gamberoni emphasizes that many people seek intense experiences to feel alive, but these experiences often generate peaks followed by crashes. Continuous alternation between excitement and exhaustion prevents accumulation. The path she proposes is the opposite: stability, continuity, graduality. Another fundamental point concerns identification with thoughts. When a person fully identifies with every mental content, they react automatically. Every thought generates an emotional response. Every emotional response generates a physical reaction. This closed loop consumes energy. If, instead, one develops a capacity for detached observation, the thought loses part of its reactive power. The nervous system remains more stable. The amount of energy dispersed decreases. Awareness is not a philosophical concept, but a tool for energy management. Humans possess a cognitive potential far greater than they usually utilize. But this potential is not activated through more effort. It is activated through an organized relaxation of the system. Relaxation does not mean inertia, but reducing unnecessary internal tension. When tension decreases, perception expands. The mind becomes less rigid, more plastic. Neuroplasticity, in an energetically favorable context, can facilitate new neural connections. In her view, the brain is not absolutely limited but functions within available energetic limits. If availability increases, the ability to integrate information increases as well. This leads to a central conclusion in her discourse. Extraordinary abilities are not something to chase. They are a consequence. They are not pursued directly. They emerge naturally when conditions are right. Mental work, then, does not consist of forcing openings, but in building an internally coherent state. Coherence between thought, emotion, and physiology. When coherence exists, energy is not dispersed in internal conflicts. Coherence is a form of order, and order generates efficiency. Modern humans live in a state of constant incoherence, contradictory desires, repressed emotions, disorganized thoughts. This incoherence is a huge energy drain. Reducing internal contradictions means recovering energy. Recovering energy means increasing the likelihood that normally dormant capacities will emerge. In this second part of her reasoning, it becomes clear that transformation is not spectacular. It is methodical, silent, cumulative. There is no sudden moment of activation. There is a gradual process of accumulation. When accumulation exceeds a certain threshold, the system changes state. Human evolution is not linear. Small improvements do not produce immediately proportional results. Biological functioning follows accumulation and threshold dynamics. As long as available energy remains below a certain level, the system continues in ordinary mode. But when a critical mass is surpassed, a qualitative reorganization occurs. This idea is central to her vision. It is not the single practice that produces change. It is the continuity of accumulation over time. Sleeping better for one night does not transform the system. Eating lighter for 2 days does not create a perceptual leap. Reducing mental noise for a few hours does not alter the neurobiological setup. Consistency creates surplus. The human organism always tends toward homeostasis, maintaining internal balance. If conditions are unstable, all energy is used for compensation. Only when balance becomes stable and sustained over time can the system allocate resources to more refined functions. In this sense, expanded capacities emerge when the body is no longer engaged in survival, but can invest in expansion. The concept of survival, in her analysis, is not only about physical emergencies. A person can live in a state of micro-survival daily without realizing it. Continuous stress, inflammatory nutrition, irregular sleep, unresolved emotional conflicts. All these factors keep the system defensive. The defensive mode consumes energy. When the organism perceives stability, the parasympathetic nervous system becomes more active. Heart rate regularizes, breathing deepens, digestion improves. This physiological state is the terrain for energy accumulation. Energy is not infinite. It is a resource that can be wasted or invested. Every daily choice represents a direction, dispersion, or accumulation. The concept of energetic critical mass implies that once a certain level of stability is surpassed, the brain can enter different functional configurations. It is not about developing new organs or structures, but using existing ones differently. The human brain possesses extraordinary complexity. Yet in ordinary life, many connections remain underutilized. This is not because they are mysteriously blocked, but because the system does not have the energy to maintain them active. Every neural network requires metabolic consumption. Activating distant brain areas simultaneously implies a higher demand for oxygen and glucose. If the body is already engaged elsewhere, this activation cannot stabilize. When energy surplus becomes consistent, the brain can integrate more information simultaneously. This leads to phenomena such as rapid insights, global perceptions, and the sensation of understanding everything in an instant. It is not magic, but integration. Every sensory system has a minimum threshold below which a stimulus is not consciously perceived. Yet the brain receives far more information than consciousness records. With higher energy availability and less mental noise, this threshold can slightly lower. Lowering the threshold means becoming more sensitive to subtle environmental variations, body language, microexpressions, and tonal shifts in voice. What appears as mind reading could, according to this view, be a form of extremely refined perception of normally ignored signals. The ordinary mind filters to survive. The energetically stable mind can afford to perceive more. Sara Gamberoni emphasizes that this process is not spectacular. It does not produce cinematic effects. Instead, it produces growing lucidity, prolonged concentration, and broader contextual awareness. When energy is sufficient, memory functions differently. Information does not remain fragmented but connects into coherent networks, enhancing recall speed and associative creativity. An energy-poor system must choose what to keep active. An energy-rich system can maintain more connections simultaneously. The concept of state change is perhaps the most interesting point of her reasoning. In physics, when a system surpasses a certain energy threshold, it can shift phases: solid, liquid, gas. According to Gamberoni, something analogous can occur in the nervous system. It is not about changing structure, but changing mode of operation. The transition is not gradual, but emerges when conditions are mature. This explains why some people experience sudden moments of deep clarity after periods of discipline and stabilization. It is not random. It is the result of invisible accumulation. Discipline, in her view, is not rigidity. It is continuity, repeated coherent choice over time. Another fundamental element is intention. Intention directs energy. If a person accumulates energy but has no clear internal direction, the energy remains diffuse. When orientation exists, energy concentrates and amplifies the effectiveness of the involved neural networks. Intention and attention work together. The development of human capacities requires three simultaneous elements: physiological stability, reduction of mental dispersion, and intentional orientation. Missing any of these prevents accumulation from reaching the transformative threshold. Her perspective eliminates entirely the idea that genetic privilege alone explains extraordinary capacities. She does not deny individual differences, but maintains that most people never explore even a fraction of their energetic potential, not because they cannot, but because they live in constant dispersion. The central message becomes extremely concrete. Do not try to become extraordinary. Become stable. Reduce noise. Respect biological rhythms. Simplify nutrition. Train attention. Maintain coherence. The rest, in her vision, is a physiological consequence. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content on unlocking human potential. Stay curious and see you in the next episode here on Compelling Topics.